Hello, welcome back to Book Chats from Lonsdale Public Library. Here we are at the end of 2020. What a year. We will never forget it, put it that way. But with everything else that's happening, as with any other year, there are some great books that came out this year. So I'm gonna do sort of a best of 2020. I'm gonna start with a few that were on a lot of those best of the year critics list. And those I haven't read, so trust the critics. I can't help you. And then I'm going to go through our staff favorites. And those are all books that came out, if not this year, at least within the last couple of years. So we're going to start with the critics' favorites, and the one that was mentioned on the most lists I found was The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. It's the story of twin sisters from a small southern black community who run away at age 16 and end up leading very radically different lives. One ends up living in their hometown, back in their hometown, with her black daughter, while the other passes for white. Even her white husband doesn't know about her past. So what will happen when their own daughter's storylines intersect? This sweeping multi-generational family story landed on 25 different 2020 best of lists. So sounds like it's worth giving that one a shot. The next one is Leave the World Behind by Ruman Alam. I hope I'm saying that right. And in this one, it's the story of Amanda and Clay, who rent a luxury house in a remote corner of Long Island for a relaxing vacation with their teenage son and daughter. Perfectly normal thing to do. Excuse me, I'm dry. But late one night, there is a knock on the door. And it's the owners of the house, older couple Ruth and G.H. And they bring the news that there's a sudden blackout that's swept the city. This is New York, obviously. And the TV and the internet are down. There's no close neighbors. So who do you trust? And, you know, so what happens between these two different families? Sounds like a very intriguing premise. And then the third one that's recommended by a lot of the critics this year is Transcendent Kingdom by Yasi, the author of Homegoing, which was a very big hit last year. And it follows a family of immigrants from Ghana who live in Alabama. Gifty is a PhD candidate in neuroscience studying depression and addiction. Her brother Nana was a gifted high school athlete who died of a heroin overdose after he got injured and ended up addicted to OxyContin. Meanwhile, her suicidal mother has gone to her bed and is doing nothing. So Gifty's looking for a scientific basis for all this suffering, but meanwhile, she's also feeling a pull towards her spiritual side and trying to reckon with her upbringing in the evangelical church. So that sounds like a lot of big issues in that one as well. So you might want to give that a shot. So those are the critics' choices. Now my favorite books, I'm going to talk about two that I read this year that I thought were just very good. First, Maid, Hard Work, Low Pay, and a Mother's Will to Survive by Stephanie Land, which is a memoir. And she tells a story that, unfortunately it's all too common in this country. She finds herself, she's planning to go to college, but an unexpected pregnancy puts the brakes on that plan. And she finds herself a single mother. She has no familial support system. So she just barely manages to scrape by cleaning houses. And she has a lot of talk about how hard and frequently humiliating that job can be, and cobbling together a hodgepodge of government programs, none of which is really adequate, and all of which have all kinds of hurdles of paperwork and indifferent gatekeepers. So somehow she manages to finish college and she writes this book, but it's not one of those, happy ending, look how I pulled myself up by my bootstraps books, but a real indictment of how easy it is to fall into poverty, how exhausting it is to be poor, and how insufficient our safety net is. So it's a very personal story, but it's one with broad implications. Very well written as well. And now I'm really going to go off the reservation. You may actually have heard of this book if you saw my recommendation of coming-of-age graphic novels for kids. So yeah, it's a juvenile graphic novel, New Kid by Jerry Graft. It's about African-American 7th grader Jordan Banks, who loves nothing more than drawing cartoons about his life. But instead of sending him to the art school he wants, his parents sent him to a prestigious private school with a great academic reputation. And Jordan, you know, is one of the few kids of color in his entire grade. He lives in a different place. He's sort of a different socioeconomic status. So he really has to learn to navigate this new culture and find a way to make new friends and not lose his old friends. And he struggles with issues of identity. And it's very subtle but truthful about well-meaning but ignorant white people and not nice white people, and you know, a whole gamut of characters. It's a book that really rewards careful reading and looking, because it's a graphic novel, so there's a lot of information in the images. So, you know, even though it's a graphic novel for kids, it's got a lot packed into it. And I definitely recommend it. And there is a sequel, which we have on order, so we'll have that one shortly. Next, I'm going to talk about Susan's favorites, and she wrote me these beautiful descriptions, so we're going to go with her words here. Fire in Paradise, An American Tragedy by Alistair Gee and Danny Aguiano, both of whom write for The Guardian and live in the San Francisco Bay Area. So you may recall this from the news. On the weekday morning of November 8th, 2018, the campfire roared through the town of Paradise, California. Swallowing a football field a second, it burned 20,000 acres in less than 14 hours, leaving at least 85 dead and 30,000 homeless. The shock and aftermath of this catastrophe is still with us, leaving a refugee crisis that has no precedent in this country. The authors write with great and horrific detail, including interviews with firefighters, residents, experts in science and climate breakdown, and others. Reading this will change your life. Do it. So there you go. That's a good recommendation. And the second one from Susan is In the Night of Memory by Linda Lagarde Grover. See, I did the hard name right and the easy name badly. The author of The Road Back to Sweetgrass. It starts with a quote. Our mother Loretta gave us the most beautiful name she could think of. She gave us a memory, and when Rainey was 4 and I was going on 3, our mother gave us to the St. Louis County foster care system. So this novel is dedicated to the missing Native women and all who grieve them. So fiction, but based in reality. Do not think this will be a one-dimensional story. Although the focus is on the Gillette family and Indian country, you will hear many voices and many stories. Heartrending and heartwarming, uplifting and tragic. Even humorous. This beautiful book is about the people around you in our Minnesota, their loss, their love, their resilience. So that sounds like another real excellent book. I am adding these to my list. Next staff member on our list is Lois. And she recommends Rhys Bowen's Royal Spinous series, which I may also have mentioned at some point because I love this series as well. The latest title is The Last Mrs. Summers. So it's a cozy mystery series following Georgiana Rannoch, who's the daughter of a duke, but there's no money left in the family, so she's had to make her own way in the 1930s in England. Things are looking up in this book. She's just back from her honeymoon with her new husband, Darcy, but he has to go do something mysterious for the government. We're never exactly sure what he does. So Georgiana accompanies her best friend, Belinda, to Cornwall to visit a cottage she has inherited. And they bump into some acquaintances of Belinda's, but as is inevitable in these things, one of them turns up dead. And when Belinda is suspected of the crime, Georgetta has to prove her friend's innocence. It's a great, cozy series, likable characters, great period detail. So if you're into that kind of thing, it's a lot of fun. And then Penny has 2 recommendations for us. The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, France, 1714. In a moment of desperation, a young woman makes a Faustian bargain to live forever and is cursed to be forgotten by everyone she meets. Thus begins the extraordinary life of Addie LaRue, and a dazzling adventure that will play out across centuries and continents, across history and art, as a young woman learns how far she will go to leave her mark on the world. But everything changes when, after nearly 300 years, Addie stumbles across a young man in a hidden bookstore, and he remembers her name. Ooh, intriguing. And our second recommendation is The 10,000 Doors of January. I forgot to write down the author, sorry. In a sprawling mansion filled with peculiar treasures, January Scholar is a curiosity herself. As a ward of the wealthy Mr. Locke, she feels like one of the artifacts that decorate the halls, carefully maintained, largely ignored, and utterly out of place. Then she finds a strange book. A book that carries the scent of other worlds and tells a tale of secret doors, of love, adventure, and danger. Each page turn reveals impossible truths about the world, and January discovers a story increasingly entwined with her own. Lush and richly imagined, a tale of impossible journeys, unforgettable love, and the enduring power of stories awaits in, Alex E. Harrow's spellbinding debut. And finally, we've got one recommendation from Darlene. She recommends Unraveling Oliver by Liz Nugent. Oliver Ryan has the perfect life. He's a wealthy and successful author of children's books, which are illustrated by his wife, Alice. Until one evening, after eating the dinner Alice has carefully prepared, Oliver savagely assaults her and leaves her for dead. But why? So the book reveals his past a piece at a time through the eyes of Oliver and various of his friends and acquaintances. And we find that he's been wearing a mask for decades. This portrait of a psychopath draws comparisons to Patricia Highsmith's The Talented Mr. Ripley, which, if you've read, another classic thriller, Darlene testifies that she literally couldn't put it down. She started reading and read all day. So that's usually the sign of an exciting story. So hopefully this will give you some new ideas for what to read as we ring out 2020 and hope that 2021 is a little brighter year. Have a good one.